You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and it is Friday, which means it is time to make our predictions for week number 11 of the NFL. We're hot off the heels of what honestly kind of was a little bit of a dud of a Thursday night football game. I was expecting it to be a little bit more exciting there, very much defensive heavy, and to be fair, I do like a good defensive game, but I thought we were going to see a little bit more offense from that matchup there. Ultimately, Eagles running away with things towards the end of the game. Saquon Barkley continuing to do Saquon Barkley things. Had a lot of fun, though, with last night's game, but now we're looking into Sunday. We're looking into those matchups. Monday Night Football included in this as well. So I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on this weekend's games. Who do you expect to come away with a win? Any shocking upsets? Fire away down in the comment section below. Let me hear from you all. But diving first into an NFC North clash as the Green Bay Packers will be taking on the Chicago Bears in Chicago. This one is a little bit of an interesting one because while the Bears' offense has been very, very not good since we got out of the bye week for them, the Green Bay Packers have had some issues themselves offensively. Jordan Love throwing a lot of interceptions this season. He has actually thrown an interception in every single game that he has played this year, which is 7 to this point. And Chicago, being a defense that isn't afraid to go after the football themselves through the air, they've got 8 interceptions so far this season, puts them in the upper third of the NFL. This game is not maybe as cut and dry as you would think, especially with it being in Chicago at that. Chicago, though, has scored just 27 points, averaging 9 points per game in the last 3 games that they've played coming out of the bye. But the Packers themselves, they've been letting teams move them and letting teams score. They're allowing about 24 points per game right now in their last 3. So this is an intriguing matchup to say the least. You obviously have a new offensive coordinator at the helm as well in Chicago with Thomas Brown taking over as Shane Waldron was given the boot. And I genuinely can't believe that Matt Eberflus is being given the opportunity to fire people here, but this is the reality we're living in. I'm sorry, Chicago fans, but I am with you on the fire Eberflus train. That being said, Thomas Brown, he called plays for Carolina last season. Numbers were not really good, and to be fair, it was Carolina last season, so I don't really want to sit there and hold too much of that against him. That's one of the most talent-depleted rosters in the NFL. Green Bay, though, with where they are defensively, they are tied for second in the NFL in takeaways here. They're a very aggressive defense, not afraid to go after the football, and with just the struggles that we have seen from Chicago and some of the turnovers that we've got from them, that is something I am keeping an eye on here. I'm hoping that for Chicago's sake, they try to keep the passing game just very quick and short. Get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hand quickly. Let him get into a rhythm. Let's slow down on the deep throws. He has not really found a ton of success with them this year. On throws going over 20 yards or more, you're looking at a 7 of 38 attempt to completion rate here with just 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions. So, I mean, it's not been pretty with the deep ball, and I really do think that this Bears offense would benefit from a nice steady ground attack and just trying to get the football out of Caleb Williams' hands as quickly as possible into the playmakers that he has surrounding him there. As for who I think is going to win the matchup, though, I do think that health might be a little bit of a factor in this game here. It sounds like Jaquan Brisker's not coming back anytime soon. You also had the injury to Tevin Jenkins last weekend as well. So there are some things worth keeping an eye on Chicago's end, whereas when you look at Green Bay, there's a lot of guys that are just limited here, and it's frankly a toss-up on whether they wind up participating or not. I would assume the vast majority of them do end up playing, but just some injuries on both sides that are worth keeping an eye on. But I think I am leaning the Packers in this game here, 24-17. The offense in Chicago just has me really concerned at this point here, and I think that the issues stem a little bit further beyond just Shane Waldron and what he's been doing for the offense to this point in the season. So I'm hoping that a change at OC helps. I'm not going to bank on it. And with the way this Packers defense has been playing, again, they have been letting teams score, but they can come away with the football, and they have been known to take the football away quite a bit so far this season. I think I'll give the slight edge to Green Bay going into Lambeau to get the job done. This next game here, if Mac Jones is starting, which it sounds like that's going to be the case, I genuinely do not have any real idea as to like what the win condition or scenario is for a Jacksonville Jaguars upset, other than the Detroit Lions just looking ahead and not taking this game as seriously as they should be. I look at this game in a very similar light to how it kind of worked out with Detroit against Tennessee a few weeks ago. And I honestly think that there's a good chance if that ends up happening, this is where Peterson loses his job. Everyone seems to think that that job is hot to be changed in the very near future here. And if we see Jacksonville just get absolutely dumpstered by the Lions, I do think that there is a good opportunity that this is the last game Peterson coaches for the Jacksonville Jaguars here. You look at Detroit, just where they're set up right now. I mean, they have a league best point differential of plus 113, whereas when you look at Jacksonville, near the bottom of the NFL, sitting at 26th at minus 62. Mac Jones, again, being the quarterback for this team, does not give me a ton of hope. Plus, injuries at the wide receiver spot have been a bit of an issue. And also, you're looking at Tank Bigsby now as well. Did not participate in practice both Wednesday and Thursday, and I think he's been a nice constant for this offense in the absence of Travis Etienne. I don't know. I don't know how you take the Jaguars in this one unless you're just somebody that has a ton of money to blow and you want to gamble on a team that that you think has, very slim chances of winning and pulling off that I'm sure that the line for that is crazy. Again, not a betting channel here, but I'm sure that the line for that one is crazy if the Jaguars pull off the upset. I don't see how they get it done. I have the Lions winning 40-17. I do think it's another blowout and it's a runaway type of game. They are going to physically outmatch Jacksonville in just about every facet of the game, whether it's running the football, whether it's throwing the football. Jacksonville's one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL, and Jared Goff has been nails for a vast majority of this season, minus the 5 interception game. So I just don't know how you go Jacksonville here. Now we have the Raiders heading into Miami to take on the Dolphins. The Raiders, for this one here, both these teams, I guess I should say, in a must-win situation for very different reasons. You look at the Raiders right now, and Antonio Pierce kind of in a situation where he's fighting for his job right now as the team is currently sitting at 2-7. And the question has it's grown louder and louder every single week. How the hell did the Raiders not go for some sort of quarterback beyond Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell and now Desmond Ridder because O'Connell's hurt during this past offseason? If they were really trying to seriously make a push this year, it still baffles me that they did not really make much of an effort to secure a top-flight quarterback beyond Gardner Minshew. It really is baffling to me. Then you look at Miami. They're fighting very aggressively for a very different reason, because this is a team that had playoff hopes coming into the season. Sitting at 3-6, they have to win if they want to keep those playoff hopes alive. Now, that being said, there's a story or not necessarily a story, but a comment that was made by one Deshaun Elliott recently, who was saying that part of the reason Miami's having the issues they have is because the Miami culture over there makes it very difficult for a locker room to grow together and to stay focused with all of the distractions. I thought that was a pretty interesting read to see coming into this preview here, and I wanted to make sure I brought that up because that's one of those things that, not that you don't think about it, but like when you compare a place like, I don't know, Green Bay, what is Green Bay really known for? It's not a party town, but then you think of Miami and all the stuff that you have to do out there at your fingertips and at your disposal, especially if you got a lot of money. I can see what he's trying to say there. So maybe it extends beyond just the Tua situation in Miami right now, but I really do think it was more so quarterback loss than anything else for the Dolphins at this point here. I think this team would be in a much different situation had they not lost Tua, but I did think that was an interesting little tidbit from Elliott to pop up here. That being said, for the actual matchup itself, though, very curious to see how Las Vegas plans on slowing down Achane Mostert and Jalen Wright here. The Miami Dolphins, for what it's worth, even when Tua was out, still able to run the football at least somewhat well, maybe not quite as effectively because teams didn't have to respect what they were doing through the past. But Las Vegas right now ranking 22nd in rushing yards per game allowed with 4.5 yards per attempt as well. The rushing has been much better with Tua back under center. Teams have to obviously respect what he does as a quarterback and as a passer, so I do think that there's a good chance we see some heavy effort from Achane and company in this one. The other thing I'm looking at here is just protecting Tua overall. They're facing Max Crosby, who is kind of a one-man wrecking machine over in Las Vegas. He is essentially the sacks and pressure on that defensive front right now. He spent about 83% of his snaps on the left side here, so he's going to be matching up with Kendall Lamb for the vast majority of this game here as Kendall Lamb continues to take over for Austin Jackson, who's been injured. But this is one that you definitely need to make sure. Not only do you know where Max Crosby is, but you're also sending help in that direction as well, because Max Crosby alone is a game wrecker. They've got to take care of Tua in this one here. They can't let him be getting hit blindsided or anything like that. Him being a left-handed quarterback, that means that the blind side's the right side, not the left side, so just definitely something worth keeping in mind. And then, of course, you have the changes for the offense in Las Vegas as Scott Turner has been named the new offensive coordinator. Norv Turner was brought in kind of like as an advisor type of role, I guess you could say. Joe Philbin's now going to be the offensive line coach. So there's a lot of questions up in the air. Gardner Minshew is going to be the quarterback for this one here. A lot of uncertainty surrounding Las Vegas at the moment. And while this could be all net positives for them, I'm going to shy away from that kind of gamble, I guess you could say. And I'm going to lean Dolphins on here. And something tells me that this one might get a little bit ugly. I'm going to go Dolphins like 28-17, but if the Dolphins cross 30, because it kind of feels like one of those games where with everything going on in Las Vegas, they fall behind quickly and fast, I wouldn't be shocked to see Miami go over 30 points, but I'll say 28-17 for now, but wouldn't be shocked to see Miami run away with it. Next, we have the Rams heading into New England to take on the Patriots. First thing I'm looking at here, offensive line of both sides, because you look at the Patriots last week, taking advantage of a banged-up O-line in Chicago, racking up 9 sacks on the week against the Bears. Curious if they figured something out or if it really was just a matter of how bad the Bears' offensive line is. But then on the Rams side of things, Rams second in pressure this season at 41%, ninth in sack rate. And when you look at what the rookies over there have been doing in conjunction with Byron Young as well, but the rookies, Jared Verse, third in pressure rate in the NFL as an individual out of everyone. That's not just rookies, that's every single player that rushes the quarterback in the NFL. Third, Jared Verse has been awesome for that pass rush over there in Los Angeles. Braden Fisk, on the other hand, has been really impressive himself. He and Jared Verse combining for 71 total pressures to this point in the season, which is the most by a rookie duo in 7 years, and they've got plenty of games to go. It's been impressive what they've been able to hit on over there in Los Angeles, and it's funny considering it's a team that not too long ago was all F them picks. It's just it's ironic and unironic at the same time here. We also have Ramondre Stevenson coming into this game here. Now, the Rams' run defense been a pretty good unit to this point here. They've allowed only 73.5 yards per game in the last 4 weeks. They've really tightened up and gotten really good to running back specifically. Ramondre Stevenson, he's only run for 39 yards per game in that same span, and I'm curious to see if he can get the ball rolling here in Los Angeles. I feel like in order for this Patriots offense to really be able to bring it to the Rams, and a lot's going to rely on the defense and holding the Rams down, but if they want to be able to keep pace in any capacity, if maybe the Rams get away with a touchdown or two too many early in the game, you've got to be able to get Ramondre going on the ground. And of course, defensively, the Patriots have got to take care of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, who since returning against the Vikings have been on a bit of a tear. Cooper Kupp with 41 receptions for 382 yards and a couple of scores. Nacua himself, 21 catches for 250 yards. The guys over in the secondary in New England, Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, they are all going to have their hands full going up against these two guys. They are a 1-2 punch as good as just about any other in the league, and I'll be very curious to see who Christian Gonzalez winds up getting matched up against and who winds up having to deal with the other of the two. We've seen Christian Gonzalez follow the number one in pretty much every single game, but like when you look at the game against the Jets, he went up against Devontae Adams while Marcus Jones went up a lot against Garrett Wilson, and Marcus Jones definitely had some struggles there, so I'll be interested to see how they dictate who winds up being the guy that they want to follow. Do they want to go after the young gun Puka with Christian? Do they want to go after the savvy vet with Christian? Very curious to see how that whole matchup plays itself out. As for who I think is going to win here, I don't want to say that it's impossible for the Patriots to win, because at this point now they have 2 wins in their last 3 games, and they've definitely surprised with play over this last 3 weeks altogether. They were really lucky to be in a position to nearly beat the Titans a couple of weeks ago, but they still found a way to get themselves in that position here. I think they can hang around because the Rams defense has been able to, or not able to, but has allowed some teams to move a little bit more than you'd like on them, especially like when you look at what happened against Miami. Obviously, I wouldn't say that the Patriots offense is on par with Miami's, but I will say that the Rams can be prone to letting some things get by them. So I like the Rams, but I like them like 28-20. I think that maybe they'll be able to offensively take advantage of this Patriots defense a little bit here. But don't be surprised if the Patriots at least hang around. But I don't know if they have the offensive firepower to keep up with Puka, with Kupp, obviously Matthew Stafford at quarterback, Kyron Williams in the backfield. Like, there's just a lot for you to deal with. Not to mention, of course, Demarcus Robinson, who's a great third wide receiver for the Rams team as well. Just tough to really lean Patriots into this one, even if it is in Gillette. Next, and this is one of those games where every single week I really wish I didn't have to make a pick for it, the Cleveland Browns heading into New Orleans to take on the Saints. Big question I feel that you get every single week when Jameis Winston is your quarterback is, which Jameis Winston are you going to get? Are you going to get a 3 touchdowns passes Jameis Winston, or are you getting a 3 interceptions Jameis Winston? Nobody really knows, but one thing I do know, the Saints, especially that secondary, not afraid to go after the football, sitting on 12 interceptions this season, which puts them at 4th in the NFL. I will say, I think there's a good chance we see at least a pick or 2, something along those lines. I'm not going to guarantee it, but I do think there is a good potential for it, just considering how aggressive the Saints defense can be. And Jameis Winston, bit of a gunslinger type of guy. He loves to throw the football, and he'll put it in just about wherever he thinks he can fit it, whether it should be a good decision or not. The other question I have about this game here is going to be Nick Chubb, and if he's going to finally be able to get the ball going on the ground here, averaging just 2.7 yards per attempt since his return with only 113 yards. New Orleans is allowing 141 yards per game, which is good for 6th most in the NFL right now, and they're also allowing about 5.1 yards per attempt, which is also 2nd most. So you have been able to run against the New Orleans Saints this season. Now, obviously, there has been a little bit of a change with the firing of Dennis Allen, and the defense did look pretty good last weekend, but that is something worth keeping an eye on. Yes, the coaching has changed and maybe some of the play calling, but it's still the same guys. It's still the same scheme overall. So there is an opportunity to find some success there, and maybe this is the game where Nick Chubb finally finds his footing again. The other thing I'm looking at is that New Orleans pass rush, because this is one of those things that looked really good last week against a pretty solid offensive line in Atlanta. They had 3 sacks and a 50% pressure rate at Kirk Cousins last week against the Atlanta Falcons. Cleveland leading the league in sacks allowed with 43, and they are also 2nd highest in sack rate at 11.3%. There's a good chance that maybe we see the Saints double down on that, find some more pressure this week, and get after Jameis Winston, maybe force him into that bad throw or 2. And then the other thing, this is just a random one that I pulled because I still can't believe that the Saints pulled off that win last week over Atlanta. And a big piece of that had to do with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 109 yards, couple of tutties to boot. Is that a thing? Like, are we seeing the emergence of a Derek Carr to MVS connection? Is that something that teams are going to have to start, playing around and making sure it doesn't get by them? Because it seemed like the Atlanta Falcons were not nearly expecting those two to be on the same page the way they were and in sync. And sure enough, it wound up burning them. So just a little something to keep an eye on here. And with the Browns having been sellers the past few weeks, prior to the trade deadline a few weeks ago, this isn't the same team that they were even prior to the trade deadline, giving away some key pieces on both offense and on the defensive side. Just something to keep in mind. As for who I think is going to win, though, here, this is a tough one here. I think when I checked, the Browns are like -1 favorites, if I'm remembering correctly here, and it doesn't really surprise me, just considering where the Saints are. But in New Orleans, with Derek Carr, offensive line in New Orleans still a concern, in my opinion, but something that when you look at the state of the Cleveland Browns and just where they are and how poor their offensive production has been, I think I got to go Saints on this one for the upset victory. Home underdogs. Give me the upset. New Orleans, 21-17. Probably not a game you're clamoring to tune into. And now this one, this is one of those games. This is a 1 o'clock game here. Baltimore heading into Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. How this game did not get flexed into some more primetime location makes no sense to me. But here we are, 1 o'clock, Baltimore Steelers, both teams with 7 wins, battle for the AFC North. I hate that this game is not in a more primetime slot because all eyes should be on this one here. The Ravens averaging 32 points per game right now. They are 1st in the NFL, just about 32. They're technically under, but just about 32 rounding up. they have been a juggernaut putting points on the board this year. Now, the Steelers, on the other hand, finding their offense over the last few weeks with Russell Wilson, their bread and butter, that defense, as it always is, and just how good they are at keeping people out of the end zone, allowing just about 16 points per game themselves. They are second in the NFL right now. This is two heavyweights on both sides of the ball, finally colliding and meeting, and we're going to find out who runs the North in the AFC. This is must win for both of these teams here. I think for Pittsburgh, it's very much like, and I feel like you kind of got it with the Commanders last week, but this is like the legitimizer, this game right here. Do you knock off what is a lot of people's AFC favorite right now in the Ravens, a team that has been bulldozing teams on the ground? Lamar's on an MVP run right now. This is the litmus test for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You come out victorious in this game, nobody can question you. Same thing for the Ravens. You need this game because you can't afford to take a loss and drop to 7-4 as Pittsburgh leapfrogs you to 8-2. Now, the way I see it, this really comes down to a couple of things. And I don't want to make football sound simple, but I think these two things really do wind up deciding the game. First and foremost, Russell Wilson has looked phenomenal since taking over at quarterback for Pittsburgh. He's done a great job protecting the ball. His completion percentage is a little bit low, but 8.7 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns to just 1 pick. He's taking care of the football. He's putting the ball where it needs to be. He's made some clutch throws in big situations. Going back to last week, he had the awesome throw and catch to George Pickens, and then the game sealer to Mike Williams, who had literally joined the team like 4 days prior to that. He has been playing extremely well, and this Ravens team has not been able to defend the pass in the slightest, allowing about 294 yards per game. They're on like a historically bad run right now as a pass defense with the amount of plays that they are letting get behind them, allowing 6.9 yards per play. They've allowed 22 passing touchdowns this season, which leads the league. If they can't slow down Russell Wilson, like, yes, Pittsburgh, their formula is pound the rock, tough defense, but Russell Wilson is opening up that game plan a little bit and is allowing them to become more of a pass-heavy team. And the Baltimore Ravens, they're one of the best run defenses in the NFL, so they're going to have to lean on Russell Wilson in this game. And I don't quite know if the secondary in Baltimore is up to the task. They have not been for the vast majority of this season, and they have not looked good against the pass hardly at all this season, at any real point in the year. So that is one thing. The other thing that I'm looking at here, and this is where it's going to come down to toughness, grit, and will, and who wants it more. It's going to be that Pittsburgh run defense and that defensive front specifically holding up against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. You have 1,658 yards combined and 14 touchdowns as well between both Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And Henry's on a historical kind of run right now. Only running back at the age above 30 to have 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns through 9 games since 1970. He is moving right now, and that dual threat between he and Lamar has clearly become just as big of a problem as everyone anticipated when it was first announced that Derrick Henry was going to Baltimore. Pittsburgh's run defense, though, should be up for the task. 4th in yards per game allowed, with only 3 yards per attempt allowed as well, tied for 3rd in the league with the 4th best run stuff rate according to Next Gen Stats. You're led by guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt up front. You got Patrick Queen in the back of that group in the linebacking room, and then of course you have Preston Smith, who's coming in. He's going to find himself a decent workload now because Alex Highsmith not going to be playing in this matchup here. A really tough loss, but that Preston Smith signing is massive now, because that was exactly why you get him. You already lost Highsmith for a little bit, and I do think it hurt the defense, and it was noticeable that he wasn't there to play like that Robin to TJ Watt's Batman role. Now Preston Smith's in here. He can slot right in, effective guy that can set the edge. He can go after the quarterback, do all those things you need him to do. I think that was a fantastic trade idea for the Steelers. Glad they went and got it, because it's literally going to pay off as soon as the week after an injury happens to Highsmith. For this game, though, who I think is going to win, I mean, we could sit here and talk in circles about matchups. There are some concerns about injuries on the Steelers' end and even on the Ravens' end as well. Like, there are guys that you could mention on both sides. This game's going to be close. This is another dogfight. If I know Steelers, and I feel like I've been watching a lot of their football games this year, If there's one thing I know, they're going to play teams tight. You're going to be sweating the game out to the finish line, and this feels like another one of those matchups here. I think both offenses are in a position to be able to exploit the defense in some capacity, in some way, but in Pittsburgh, I have a really hard time betting against this Steelers team right now. That defense is so good, and with such a glaring weakness in the pass defense right now in Baltimore, this feels like that moment where Pittsburgh is going to let everyone know we're here. I could be totally wrong. Baltimore maybe runs amok, and none of this even matters. But I'm feeling Pittsburgh, so I'll take them 24-23, tight, grindy contest. And I cannot believe that this game was booked for 1 o'clock. Talk about a failure on the scheduling team's part. 24-23. Give me the Steelers. Now we have the Minnesota Vikings and Tennessee Titans. This one here, this is a question, I guess, to you all. Why do I feel like Tennessee can steal this game? And I think I know the answer, and it goes back to just me not buying into the Sam Darnold hype early in the season. Now you get a game with 3 interceptions from him last week, and thankfully Minnesota was still able to get the win in the football game, but I am really, really thinking harder about a game where you have a team that's 7-2 going up against a team that is 2-7, a lot more than I think I should be. Will Levis, though, is not exactly the quarterback I would want to have facing Minnesota and Brian Flores' defense. 4 of his 7 interceptions have come while he's under pressure, with a 54% completion rate as well in that same situation. Whereas when you look at Minnesota, 8th in pressure rate, they're 6th in sacks this year. Like, they can get after the quarterback in some of the most creative ways. Something tells me Will Levis's head might be spinning in this one here. Tennessee has a lot of success running the football this year for what it's worth and some of their struggles. They're actually 10th in the NFL in yards per game on the ground. However, Minnesota, second best run defense in the league right now. And, I mean, they're second in yards per game. They're tied for third in yards per attempt. They're 6th in overall run stuff rate. And, I mean, you're led by these 2 massive guys on the interior who have been swallowing up running backs in Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips. I mean, and not to mention you have Van Ginkel and Grenard on the edges of that defensive line as well. This is one of those games where if Tennessee can't find that success running the football, it could get a little bit ugly for them. You do have, L'Jarius Sneed missing in the secondary as well. And when you're lining up against Justin Jefferson, you got Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson's back now too, and Jalen Naylor, who's quietly had a pretty good season so far with 4 touchdowns on the year. I mean, you have gotten good play from like Roger McCreary and Darrell Baker Jr. in that secondary, but if you don't have L'Jarius Sneed, that's definitely a tough blow considering the task you have up. I wouldn't be shocked to see Tennessee play the Vikings extremely close in this game. This feels like there is a possibility. I called out Tennessee's defense a few weeks ago saying I didn't think that maybe they were as good as their numbers actually show, and they might be better than I think. I still don't think they're quite as good as their numbers, but they're somewhere in between of where I thought and where the numbers are showing they are, like somewhere in the middle. But I wouldn't be surprised if somehow, some way, with what we've seen from the Vikings, especially last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, I would not be shocked to see Tennessee hanging on a lot more than you'd probably expect them to. I like the Vikings. I'm going to take the Vikings. I have them winning 23-10, but if this is like 23-17, 23-20 by the time the game's said and done, and Tennessee has, the Vikings kind of reeling to put the game away, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest, because something feels off about Minnesota right now. And you got away with one last week. You're not going to get away with that again this week. And something tells me that the Titans could catch them. I'm scared it's going to happen, but I'm still taking the Vikings here. And then finally, the last 1 o'clock game here. The Indianapolis Colts heading into New York to take on the Jets. Another one of those games that I really wish I did not have to pick here. Anthony Richardson back at quarterback for the Colts here. His passing numbers, if you don't already know, 44% completion rate, 4 touchdowns to 7 picks. When he's under pressure, his completion rate drops to 39% with 3 interceptions as well. I genuinely do not know how he's going to fare against the Jets defense, because for what it's worth, and all the Jets struggles, their defense has still been playing pretty good, at least against the pass. They have been a little bit leaky against the run as of late, but it is something that I'm a little bit concerned about on Indianapolis's end, because I thought that the Joe Flacco thing would at least alleviate some of the problems they had. He looked good when it's weird. I feel like when Joe Flacco is the starter, he can't play, but when he's not the starter and he's just backing up for someone that's injured or coming into play, he can play. It makes absolutely no sense. It's one of those weird things in the NFL that happens, but it is what it is. The Jets, though, offensively, they have a good opportunity to get Braylon Allen and Breece Hall going in this game here. Indianapolis really can't stop anything on the ground, not even like a nosebleed. They're third most in yards per game allowed. They lead the league in runs over 10 yards or more allowed. So there's a good opportunity that the Jets can balance out their offense a little bit, and with some injury concern to Devontae Adams, you just ground and pound and fight your way to a victory. I wouldn't be shocked to see New York maybe lean that way. Same could be said for Indianapolis. Like I mentioned, the New York Jets haven't been perfect against the run this year. They're 8th in rushing yards per game allowed, 4th in runs over 10 yards or more. So they haven't been spectacular, and that's most, that I should specify that, most in 8th and 4th there, as I mentioned, for the Jets. Jonathan Taylor, though, been eating this year, 600-plus yards on the season, 4.9 yards per attempt. He has 5 rushing touchdowns to boot. There's a good chance that both these sides are really trying to get it going on the ground and lean into the running backs a bit. And then the other thing that I'm looking at here in the passing game for the Jets, can Indianapolis bring enough pressure and take advantage of an offensive line that, despite having 3 new starters brought in and be completely remade to help protect Aaron Rodgers after how bad the O-line looked last year, showing some struggles this year? Aaron Rodgers, while he does have 4 touchdowns to just 1 interception while under pressure, he's only completing 44% of his passes. That's not good. He's pretty much near the ballpark of Anthony Richardson right now, and that's not the place you want to be at this moment here. Colts are very much middle of the pack, 17th in pressure. They're the 7th lowest in blitzing in the NFL. They're very much a rush 4, drop 7 type of team. And I don't know if Indianapolis is going to be able to do enough to disrupt Rodgers. And if he's getting the ball out extremely quick, that could pose an issue for them. And I'm kind of out right now on the secondary in Indianapolis. It is something that worries me, but they could benefit from the fact that there's a real possibility Devontae Adams doesn't play. I mean, he has a wrist injury going on right now, and apparently he's listed with an illness as well. That's what they have on the practice's injury report. He's listed with a wrist and an illness, and he did not participate both Wednesday and Thursday. So that is something worth keeping an eye on there. A couple of other injuries as well on both sides, but nothing too crazy as far as I can see on here. This is a game, again, I wish I didn't have the pick, but here I am. I'll take the Jets 21-13. Probably an ugly contest, far more fitting for a 1 o'clock game than maybe the Steelers and Ravens. Like, they got this one right. And then moving into the 4 o'clock window, we have Atlanta taking on the Broncos. Why this couldn't have been moved for a game like Pittsburgh and Baltimore, I don't know. But here we are, Falcons in Denver to take on the Broncos. Big key here. If Atlanta can pressure Bo Nix, they got themselves a good shot to win this game. If they cannot, then they have themselves a problem. Atlanta's pass rush is last in sacks, sack rate, and pressure rate. They are the worst, the worst pass rush in the NFL. Bar none. No conversation about it. Bo Nix, when he's not pressured, 7 touchdowns to 3 picks, 70% completion rate. If you can't get after Bo Nix, he has shown that he can be good in the pocket. He can extend plays with his legs. If you're giving him the time to do his thing, he will do his thing. Denver's defense, on the other hand, they've been a force this year. A complete opposite end of the spectrum as far as rushing the passer goes, if you want to throw that in there as well. Allowing just 17, almost 18 points per game, I guess you could say. They're 4th best in the NFL on that front. And 4.7 yards per play, tying them for first as well. They have been incredible. And I mean, when you look at some of the guys on this defense and just who they are and how well they've played, you have Pat Surtain in 318 coverage snaps has literally seen the ball come his way just 21 times. He has been locking people up, and you have not seen a ton go his way because of how good he's playing. He has 3 picks on the year despite only 21 balls coming his way. It's been impressive watching him work. Then you look at the pass rush over there, that defensive front led by Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, and Franklin Myers. They got a bunch of really good guys up there. They're 2nd in sacks, 4th in sack rate. Atlanta, the offense is good. They're 8th in scoring. They can move. But when you look at some of the inconsistencies of this offense, because it has shown up now, they're 10 games into the season, and in 4 of those 10 games, they've struggled to put up 17 points. So there is that to keep in mind as well. If this Denver defense gets rolling, there's a good chance they can lock up this Atlanta group. Their hands will be full, though, of course. Bijan Robinson has a 5-game streak going with 100-plus yards of scrimmage right now, which is currently the longest in the NFL. You also have Drake London and Darnell Mooney, currently both ranking inside the top 8 of both receiving yards and touchdowns. Only other two duos to finish a season in that specific category of receiving yards and touchdowns, Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne, Randy Moss and Chris Carter. Not a bad couple of duos to be in the same conversation of, if you ask me. As for who I think is going to win here, the one thing that's really standing out to me right now is the injury report from the Falcons side. They have a decent amount of guys on there, and it's a lot of the secondary. You got Antonio Hamilton, Mike Hughes, and D. Alford, who are not participating in practice on Thursday. Mike Hughes was the only one who participated in limited fashion on Wednesday of those three guys, so the secondary could be hurting coming into this game here. And you look at Denver, they're pretty healthy right now coming into this matchup. So in Denver, with just how hot and cold we have seen this Falcons team be, and I mean, they just dropped the game to New Orleans, and maybe this is supposed to be their bounce-back game. I don't know. They burned me last week, and maybe I'm in my feels about this one a little bit, but I'm going Denver. Give me the Broncos 23-20. I think they can take it to them. I think they can get it done. And if that pass rush is not there, there's no reason why Bo Nix can't have a good game. Absolutely none. So I'll take Denver 23-20. Next, we're looking at an NFC West clash. Seahawks heading into San Fran, taking on the 49ers. Health could be a big deciding factor in this game, as tons of players on both sides are listed on that injury report for practices. I mean, you got, 4 guys that have not participated in practice, although a couple of them are not injury related on the Seahawks side, so it is worth mentioning that. But you do have a couple of guys in like Noah Fant. The tight end room is going to be a little bit thin there. San Francisco side, though, a little bit more concerning. Nick Bosa currently listed as not participating both Wednesday and Thursday. You also have Trent Williams, who had not participated. Those two guys can get away with not practicing and still playing, I would say, although you want them to be able to practice, obviously something going on if they're not taking the time to practice. So there are some concerning injuries on both sides here. But as for the matchup itself, I think first thing, Christian McCaffrey came back last week, looked pretty good, didn't do a ton rushing, but was doing a lot of catching the football, and that makes sense with Brandon Ayuk down for the year. You're going to see a lot of Christian McCaffrey. If he wanted to be, he could be one of the best slot wide receivers, if not the best slot wide receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. And honestly, amongst some of the best receivers in the NFL, just in general. McCaffrey, though, has a good shot with a Seattle Seahawks team that has allowed only under 100 yards 3 times this season. On top, for whatever reason, Seattle just cannot stop the run. And it baffles me because, A, you bring in McDonald, and this is supposed to be an improved defense here, but you have so many good names on this defense in Seattle, and for whatever the reason may be, it just hasn't translated. I know there's been a lot of injuries on the Seattle defense side as well, so I know there is some of that to it as well, but I thought this team would be a lot better defensively than they have been this year, and it's really been disappointing. And again, I know the injuries are a part of it, but I really thought this defense was going to be like a top 10 unit just because of scheme change, the head coach that was coming in, and a lot of the guys that they have on that roster there. Then, of course, you have DK Metcalf on the other side. On Seattle's end, coming back, this looks like he's going to be playing this week for the first time since, I believe, week 7. And in that time, up until he went down, 568 yards. He had himself three touchdowns. Always a mismatch on the football field. Big dude. What is he? 6'3", 6'4", 200 and it feels like 20 pounds or in some change or something like that. Maybe I'm underselling his weight here, but runs a 4.3. Like a physical athlete that just can dominate based off of size and speed alone, being such a wild mismatch here. 49ers are pretty strong at locking up wide receivers. They're 12th in yards allowed to wide receivers per game. But with DK coming back in the fold, you've got to feel good if you're Seattle. And then the quarterback matchup. Geno Smith versus Brock Purdy, something I wanted to highlight from this game here. These guys, the numbers, pretty damn close when you look at everything. Geno Smith is 4th in the NFL in yards total this season, holding about 100 yards more than Brock Purdy, who's ranked 6th right now. Purdy has 7 interceptions, doing a little bit of a better job protecting the football than Smith, who's sitting on 10 for the year. And then Brock Purdy has 12 touchdowns to Preston Smith's 11. Both these guys are really close in all of the numbers here, so it's really interesting to see here. And the first time that this game played out, it was a pretty close matchup until like the third quarter, and then San Francisco kind of ran away with it late. As for who I think is going to win, though, it's very difficult to beat a team twice in the NFL, especially division rivals. But the way I see it right now, San Francisco stacking up, I would argue they're a little bit of a better football team at this current moment than where Seattle stands. So I think I'm going to lean 49ers getting the win 29-24. I think it's another closer contest. I don't think San Francisco runs away with it as much, but especially with this one being in San Fran and San Fran already having gone into Seattle and beating the Seahawks, I like the 49ers, so give me San Francisco. Now we can take a look at one of, if not the most anticipated matchups of the weekend. We got the Chiefs heading into Buffalo to take on the Bills. The rivalry renewed. The way I look at this game, if you're Buffalo and you want to have a shot at locking up the number 1 seed in the AFC, you've got to go through Kansas City. You've got to take them down and get that win and put them in a spot where if they drop another game and you keep winning, you have yourself a chance to lock up that number 1. If you're the Bills, you want the playoffs going through Buffalo and the AFC's end. The question here, will the Chiefs' good fortunes finally run out? The Mahomes versus Allen series is currently sitting at a record of 4-3 with Mahomes having the slight edge here. This is one that I think could wind up being a lot more fun than some people are anticipating. When you look at offensively, scoring-wise, Buffalo, third best in the NFL, 29 points per game. Kansas City, a little bit behind them by about 5 points at 24 and some change. Both teams, though, top 10 in points per game allowed defensively. These two teams match up extremely well against each other. When you look at some of the, when it comes to like turnover differential and just who's taking care of the ball a little bit better, though, it does lean slightly towards Buffalo. And I shouldn't even say slightly. That's kind of an understatement. It does lean somewhat heavily towards Buffalo. You have a plus 13 turnover differential in Buffalo. The Bills defense has 19 takeaways this season. They are tied for they are second in the NFL, not tied, just straight up second in the NFL. You look at Kansas City, though, minus 4 turnover differential. The Chiefs have 12 offensive turnovers this season, and that is to the Bills only 6. The Bills have been taking the ball away, and they have killed the number of turnovers offensively this season by a massive margin when you look at even just as recently as last year. Taking care of the football is going to be key in this matchup here. Obviously, you're looking at the quarterbacks. Who's going to play better than the other here? Defense is going to be put to the task. And the one thing that I'm really interested in seeing, and that was a big change for both of these teams at the trade deadline, Amari Cooper on Buffalo's end, DeAndre Hopkins on Kansas City's end. Which one of these two guys can wind up being that difference maker that they were brought in to be for their respective offenses here? We've seen a decent amount from DeAndre Hopkins since he's moved his way over into Kansas City. He's been productive. He's been a piece that defenses obviously have to respect. Amari Cooper, though, maybe not quite as much, even missing some time as well. I do think, though, that completely healthy, if we get Amari Cooper in there, this Bills offense, the way they're set up right now, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Keon Coleman's going to play. There maybe is a chance that he does. He hasn't practiced at all so far this week. But if you have Amari Cooper in there with Khalil Shakir and the other guys that you have, James Cook in the backfield with Josh Allen, that offense should be A-okay, but that Chiefs defense is a tough one to go against here. On the flip side of things, though, you look at Kansas City. I'm going to be very curious how this Bills defense, which has been really good so far this year for the most part, how they wind up handling an offense that has DeAndre Hopkins, who not too long ago just scored a couple of touchdowns and nearly 100 yards in the process. And then, of course, Travis Kelce. You have Xavier Worthy, who is such a big deep threat. You, of course, also have Kareem Hunt out of the backfield, who's been pretty good for them. This game matches up extremely well. You have a lot of exciting pieces, I would say, on both sides of the ball, on both sides of the game for both of these teams here. For who I think is going to win, though, this is one that I've been thinking about all week. And this is one of the, like, as soon as I saw that this was the week that this game was coming up, I sit there and I go, great, because now I have to sit here and call what I think is one of the harder matches of the entire season, especially considering where both these teams are. Can Buffalo be the team that knocks off the undefeated Chiefs? That is the question. Can they knock off the Chiefs and open up a path for them to potentially lock up a number 1 seed in the AFC? I think Buffalo can. I really do. The record right now is, again, 4-3 with a slight edge to Mahomes. The Chiefs, though, and I've been picking them every single week, essentially, and they have not let me down to this point. I don't quite know if this Chiefs offense in the state that it's currently in, even with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, is quite ready to take down a team like Buffalo. Although I am worried about how this Bills offense holds up against the Chiefs defense, because the last time the Bills ran into a pretty good defense, the Ravens, they got completely shut down. So we'll see what happens. I think this will be very fun. I think both these quarterbacks are going to rise to the occasion. I won't be surprised to see the cape put on by both these guys and then both try to drag their teams to victory. But I think I like Buffalo 28-27. This is a fantastic game. I can't believe that this was not booked for Sunday Night Football, but I guess CBS demanded that they had this football game because they've been telling the Josh Allen-Mahomes rivalry story. But I can't believe we didn't get this game on Sunday night. Give me Buffalo 28-27. I hope I don't regret this because, again, I have been sticking Chiefs basically all season long. I don't think I've picked against Kansas City. I don't remember if I picked Baltimore over KC in week 1, but I have been picking KC through and through the whole season since at least then, I believe. So I hope this doesn't burn me here, but I think I do like the Bills by a slight hair. For Sunday night, we're looking at the Cincinnati Bengals and the Los Angeles Chargers here. Bengals, playoff hopes on the line. They have to win this football game if they want to keep those playoff dreams intact. First question I have for this Chargers defense: can you slow down Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase? And it looks like there is potential for T. Higgins to play as well. He's at least been limited in practice this week, which is a good sign at the very least. But Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, that is the connection. Currently, as it stands, Jamar Chase is on pace for the big triple crown, leading the league in receptions, in yards, and touchdowns at this very moment here. If that holds strong, I believe it'll be the first time since like Steve Smith got it done. I forget the year that he got it done, but I think he's the last guy that got it. Joe Burrow, first in passing yards, tied for first in passing touchdowns, second in passer rating. The passing attack in Cincinnati has not really been much of a problem for them for the large majority of this season. Now, LA, for what it's worth, worst. 7th in can't speak here. The Chargers, for what it's worth, 7th in the NFL in passing touchdowns allowed with 9. And they're also 9th in passing yards allowed. The defense over in LA, especially when they have Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa going after the quarterback, is a completely different unit. That being said, though, Khalil Mack's dealing with a groin injury, has not participated in practice both Wednesday and Thursday. His status being up in the air for this game definitely hurts them a bit, in my opinion. You want to have Khalil Mack in this game. On the other side, you look at Cincinnati's defense. Can they slow down the Chargers' rushing attack? The Chargers are literally like the most balanced offense in the NFL. So balanced, they have 267 passing plays to 266 running plays. That's how balanced. You want to talk about a 50-50 offense? The Chargers are through and through that. That being said, if they can run the football, they absolutely will run the football. When you look at their stat sheets, like from every single game, week in and week out, you have weeks where they are just run heavy, weeks where they are just pass heavy, weeks where it's a little bit of both. They will do what they need to do to they will identify the win condition and then go after it and do what they got to do there. That's one of the things I really like about the Chargers offensively this year. Cincinnati's season average as far as stopping the run, not great. They've allowed over 100 yards only once in their last 4 games, so they have picked it up. But overall, they have not been great defending the run. In that one game that they did allow over 100, it was 161 to Philadelphia. J.K. Dobbins, he's been good, 4.8 yards per attempt, 670 yards on the ground. He's been their lead back. Obviously, you have Gus the Bus there as well, Kamani Vidal. There are some good names in that backfield, but if we see the Cincinnati defense that can't stop the run, like the one that showed up against Philadelphia, I would firmly expect this Chargers team, in the sake of trying to control the clock, limit the possessions that the Bengals offense gets, grinding their way to a potential victory here through the ground. The other thing I'm looking at here is going to be the two young wide receivers in Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston. Johnston's caught a touchdown pass in the last couple of games. He had a really good 100-plus yard game a couple of weeks ago. Last week, a little bit more quiet, but he still caught that touchdown pass. And then McConkey's been the old reliable for Justin Herbert this year, nearly 500 yards off of 37 receptions. Cincinnati's near the top of the league in passing touchdowns and yards allowed, so this is a good game for them to continue what's been a pretty good campaign for at least McConkey, and it seems like Quentin Johnston maybe is finding some steam here. So there's a good chance that these two guys could have a solid performance, especially if Cincinnati's defense starts to tighten up. There is weaknesses against the pass in Cincinnati as well, and maybe Justin Herbert's able to exploit that with some of these young guys that they have over there. As for who I think is going to win, though, here, this is a really tough one because the Chargers, in my opinion, are overall the better team. I would take the Chargers defense 10 times out of 10 against the Bengals right now currently. It's the offense that it has me. They do things really well, but there's not one thing that they do like extremely well that they're known for with that offense, and that's kind of concerning to me. I love the 50-50 balance kind of thing that you see offensively with them because it's not, you don't see that. It's typically not like that. You typically have a pass-heavy team or a run-heavy team, a team that loves to throw the football and does it really well, or a team that loves to run the ball and does it really well. So you don't get this 50-50 thing too often, so maybe it's just a little off-putting for me to see that makes me shy away from the offense a little bit. But I do respect what they're doing there at the very least. That being said, the Bengals have to win this game. And Joe Burrow has been on a tear. And these guys have 2 losses to a Ravens team by what is like literal points. Like points. If they don't have those 2 losses to Baltimore and they come up in the clutch and win those games like they probably should have, considering the situations that they were in both of those to potentially win, you're looking at a 6-4 Bengals team. So a team, in my opinion, that might be a little bit better than what their record is showing right now. I'm going to take Cincinnati and LA. They got to have it feeling right now. A potential return of T. Higgins is also really attractive to me as well. I think the Bengals go into LA and they get the job done here. Big victory for them to keep their playoff hopes alive. Whereas the Chargers, they can kind of afford a loss considering the state of the rest of the AFC beneath them. They are like front runners for the 5 seed, and then you have teams duking it out for 6 and 7 like the Bengals right now. So they can kind of afford a loss here. And then finally, to wrap up the week, the Texans heading into Dallas to take on the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Cooper Rush set to start his second game. Listed with a neck injury, full participant in practice, but does have a neck thing going on apparently. But I'm going to be honest with you all. I won't dress this one up more than I really think it needs to be. This is a potential return game for Nico Collins. A lot of people thought he might be back last week. I myself thought he was going to be back last week. This should be the week he makes his return. Houston coming in, massive favorites in Jerry World. You have no rushing attack to speak of in Dallas. They have the second most points per game allowed defensively. Like, you would need Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb to essentially become Batman and Superman to save your team from a loss here. I don't really know how Dallas finds this way to win unless Houston is in such a bad way, especially on the offensive line, because we've seen some issues with them the last few weeks. Unless there's such a bad way on the offensive line and Nico Collins doesn't come back, and for whatever reason, they just cannot get it together offensively, and Houston finds its way into a loss, I have a really hard time leaning Dallas on this one here. I'm going to take the easy one out. I think the Texans get the win here. There are some injuries to be concerned about. Will Anderson Jr. keeping an eye on, Danico Autry, Folu Fatukasi, and on Derek Stingley Jr. All did not practice yesterday. Notable names for that defense that do have me a little bit worried, but I'm not going to sit here and put my faith in Cooper Rush and or potentially Trey Lance. So give me the Texans 28-13. I think they should win pretty handedly. If Houston Texans lose, they are in quite big trouble, I would say. But I'll take the Texans to wrap up Week 11. Those are my picks. Fire away in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts. As always, if you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.